Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today's guests we have, of course, Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Have you? And Ivan Kucherenko from Kyiv, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hi, Jonathan. Hello to everyone.
Great to have you as always. Do we have any movie to take a look?
Yeah, let's start with it, please.
Yes, okay, thank you.
For them, it is a pleasure to burn. We all know who are we dealing with. Russia is run by men who want to make it a norm, burning lives, destroying cities and villages, dividing people and erasing national borders through war. There is no nation that can stop such war alone. Unaided world leaders' engagement is needed. I'm now in Kharkiv, a city in the east of Ukraine, and unfortunately very close to the border on Russia. What does it mean for Kharkiv? A third year of constant terror. More than 1 million of people in this city. And every night and every day, Russian army is shelling the city, mostly with S-300 missiles. These are air defense missiles which Russia employs to terrorize the land. There is not a single district or street in the Kharkiv that hasn't suffered from this regular cruelty. Russia added strikes with guided aerial bombs. Russian aviation comes close to our state border and launches these bombs straight on the city. It is a weapon of indiscriminate destruction. And anyone in any city of the world, from Sao Paulo to Harbin, take this the same way as terror, just like all other Russian strikes on hundreds of other of our cities and villages. Some of them, once booming with life, are now burned to ashes, people-less, a burnt-out emptiness, the most horrible consequence of war. War that we didn't want in Ukraine, that we haven't provoked, and in which Ukraine is defending itself from Russian attempts to seize our resources and territories and destroy our national identity. And the world sees it. Behind me are the books burned down by Russian missiles. It was one of the largest publishing houses in Ukraine. People got injured here. Unfortunately, there are people killed. Temperature of burning here hasn't managed to totally reach for 451 degrees Fahrenheit. But that's what the leaders of Russia need and want, even higher temperatures. And not only on the sovereign territory of Ukraine, Russia is threatening almost all of its neighbor countries. Russia is the only state that captured the nuclear power plant and is openly using it for radiation blackmail. There is nothing that wouldn't become a weapon for Russia, including hunger. And exactly this the world felt when Ukraine was hit by Russian naval blockade. Russia is the only source of aggression and constantly tries to expand the war. Right now, these days, we are defending ourselves 60 kilometers northeast from this place, from yet another attempt of the Russian assault. Russia is preparing for offensive actions also 90 kilometers northwest from here. They gather another group of troops near our border. The one who does all this doesn't want peace. Does Russia want a dialogue? Ukraine had the world's largest experience of lies from Russian during negotiations. Lies that in particular was Russian cover-up for preparing this war. And that's exactly why global efforts are needed. Global Peace Summit of the leaders whom Russia will not be able to deceive. Summit that will show who in the world really wants to end the war and not just claim the ceasefire, which will inevitably be broken by Russian rockets and artillery, just like as it was dozens of times before. Together with Switzerland, we are preparing such summits. It starts on June 15th. More than 80 countries confirmed they will come. And we continue to work with the leaders, inviting them to join the summit. I thank everyone who really helps to bring the peace. And I am appealing to the leaders of the world who are still aside of the global efforts of the Global Peace Summit. To President Biden, the leader of the United States, and to President Xi, the leader of China, we do not want the UN Charter to be burned down just like these books. And I hope you don't want to either. Please show your leadership in advancing the peace, real peace, not just a pause between the strikes. The efforts of global majority are the best guarantee that all commitments will be fulfilled. Please support the Peace Summit with your personal leadership and participation. For all of us, it should be a pleasure to make peace.
Well
Thank you,
spoken.
Ivan. Very good presentation, and he
Yes.
spoke very well. And
yes.
it's this peace conference is being prepared indeed for 15th of June in Switzerland. As I understand, Russia is not going to participate in that conference.
They're not invited.
They're not invited. So,
You don't want to play ball with us, we're not inviting you.
I don't remember that Hitler would be invited to any peace conference.
No.
This time.
It would be strange
Really
if Hitler was invited to Tigran or to Yalta.
Funny you should
peace
mention
conference.
that, because what Russia is trying to do to Kharkiv now currently is exactly what Hitler and the Nazis were trying to do to London during the Second World War, when the Battle of when they failed to gain air superiority over the British Air Force, Royal Air Force, during the Battle of Britain. They were eventually forced to essentially terror bombing of London, trying to break the will of the British people, which of course, failed miserably. But they are repeating the mistake that the Nazis made in the Second World War, trying to use bombing as a terror weapon against populace. And you can't surrender to an airplane. Sorry. It's just not going to work. And all it is doing, it is stiffening the resolve of not only Ukraine, but also of the Western allies, who are gradually but steadily learning the lessons and remembering the lessons of the Second World War. If you're going to stop aggression, you have to stop it early, you have to stop it decisively, and you have to stop it right with the first level of aggression. You don't appease an aggressor. You don't try to buy them off or negotiate. You have to defeat them decisively at the first level of aggression. And I believe, based on listening to Mr. Zelensky's remarks, I believe that he would enthusiastically embrace, as a matter of fact, a global ballistic missile defense system as part and parcel, not only of once this war is concluded, but building towards that while we are still engaged in this conflict, steadily building up ballistic missile defenses in Ukraine and in the easternmost members of NATO, to create that ballistic missile defense shield against future Russian aggression, as well as current Russian aggression. So there's much in Mr. Zelensky's speech which is very encouraging. And also, I would take note of recent developments on the battlefield, which shows that Russia's Kharkiv offensive has pretty much stalled out. There is no strategic breakthrough. They are maybe at great expense, making very local tactical gains, but in some cases, the Ukrainians are either repelling them or are counterattacking to retake those gains. So it is coming out to be a net loss for the Russian army again, a miscalculation. They tried to commit too soon. They did not have enough extra reserves or superiority in numbers to create that strategic breakthrough or even to decisively wear down Ukrainian forces. So all of this is very encouraging in the larger sense, and I see increasing indications of based on Ukrainian operations against Crimea that shows that the Ukrainians are in fact steadily working towards isolating Crimea, cutting it off from logistical reinforcements and supply, and setting up the Russians to be cut off from reinforcement, isolating the Russian forces in Crimea, and which will enable Ukraine to commit their strategic reserves and retake the Crimea, which will be a decisive defeat.
I think there is something much more important happened that all the Ukrainian drone attacks and attacks on Crimea and so on. It's way much more important. And as that, Jonathan, you may comment on it or you may not, but let me tell you something. What happened is that Russian air defense, I'm talking about strategic air defense, with one station near Krasnodar Armavir, was completely destroyed by Ukrainian drone attacks. Now, what is significance of them? There are only 8 strategic air defense positions in Russia. Sorry, the one of them is completely been destroyed. Another one is Orsk, near Siberia region, and another one in near Khabarovsk. And there are only 8. Now it's 7 stations, strategic air defense. So now, if something is approaching from, let's see, they could control this particular station. It was controlling most the Crimea and, what's important, Mediterranean theater. So the 2 large U.S. avia group, carrier groups, Eisenhower and Ford, they are in Mediterranean right now. And Russians are completely blindsided to any activities of this group in Mediterranean. The significance of that is so important that it now confirms many things. Of course, US does not comment on that. Okay, that's fine. The result is, that's what's important, not the comments. Now, second of all is that this particular attack, successful attack, and many others cannot happen without US help, and not just help as optional help, but real first aid help that tells Ukrainians the targets, how to approach them, how to fight, how to destroy them, and so on. This is enormous significance. Now, anything what Putin thought about to continue this war and get more and more Avdiivka, and then yet another village over here and over there, that does not make any sense at all. It never made any sense, but now it's obvious. If you cannot defend your strategic air defense stations, then what are you doing in Ukraine? You poor idiots. You just have to go back home and hide. Because now, if you are blindsided to a potential US attack, then what are you doing there? Another thing, what I was very curious to find out is, there are all those Russian propagandists like Simonyan and Solovyov or so on. I don't want to even mention their names, because whatever they're saying is nothing but poison. It just doesn't have anything to do with reality. But there are some people who are well connected on the top of Russian government, but yet what they're saying is sometimes makes sense. And one of the people that I listen to is he's owner and general manager, CEO, so on, of Russian newspaper by the name Independence. It's nothing to do with London's Independence. It's just very similar name. In Russian, it's Независимая газета. That's what it is. And he's very well connected, very knowledgeable, very reasonable. And I even met him in Moscow, believe it or not, about 12, 13 years ago during the chess tournament. He's a big lover of chess. And I introduced myself, and we could just have maybe 2 minutes conversation. So what he is saying now, that based on his learning of existing situation, he does not believe that any peace anytime soon is possible at all. Number one reason is it's a complete mistrust from Russians to West, Ukrainians, and so on, and vice versa. So the peace simply is impossible. Now, if the peace is impossible, then what is a future for the next several years? He says that the economic pressures on Russia are enormous, and it's not only US and Western sanctions. It's a necessity to completely change the Russian economy to military one. It's something what eventually destroyed the Soviet Union. So either Russians didn't learn anything from what's happened to the Soviet Union, or they believe that their economy is more agile, and because it has elements of free market economy or so on. So they will be able to withstand all these pressures. However, this can last dozens of years. There will be no peace in next foreseeable future between Russia and the West and United States. So there will be a Cold War too. However, this is a strange war simply because strategically in the First World War, the Cold War, they were basically the two completely different systems. One is capitalist system, if you will, another one socialist system or communist system. You can call it any way, because both don't exist anymore. So.
Yeah, it was essentially a command economy, a centrally directed command economy versus a free or largely free market economy with some elements of government, not control, but government assistance. But yeah, essentially capitalism versus centrally directed socialism.
Okay, so here's some elements of ideology, the economic approach, the competition between these two systems, because at that time during the Cold War, nobody knew that this Russian so-called command economy system is a horrible, like Potemkin village type of economy. It's not real economy at all. But nobody at that time knew that. So that's why they still existed until late 80s.
Well, interesting. You raise a very interesting point, Sasha. When I was in graduate school, doing my master's and my doctoral studies at University of Miami, I was in one class where my professor introduced an unclassified study published by the CIA that analyzed the Soviet economy and its projected success. The CIA study projected that based using the Soviet Union's own figures, they did an analysis and they concluded that the Soviet Union would reach an economic crisis point by 1985. And interestingly enough, it proved to be very prescient, because as you recall, in the book KGB, The Inside Story, published by Christopher Andrew and Oleg Gordievsky, a KGB defector. In that book, they talked about how in April 1985, the KGB sent an analysis to Gorbachev analyzing the U.S. Strategic Defense Initiative. And they concluded that eventually the US SDI program would eventually be able to block 90% of Soviet missiles in a first strike, and that there was no way that the Soviet Union could keep up with this capability. Now, mind you, at that time, were we actually able to do what they were projecting? No. But the Russians believed it, that it could happen, and they acted on that belief, and they literally spent themselves into bankruptcy trying to counter what was at the time a phantom SDI program, essentially research and development. Now, however, we have the technology, we have the means, and we have the capability, given the political decision to do so, to do what the KGB feared back in April 1985, to effectively neutralize the Russian nuclear arsenal. So this is a very interesting reality that is occurring, and it is this is the basis of what I would recommend is a strategy of asymmetric response, strategia asymmetricheskaya reagирования, what the Russians fear most.
Yeah, absolutely right. But I just want to add to what I was saying about the Russian strategic air defense being destroyed.
Yes.
Krasnodar. The significance of that is also, in fact, that it just proves the cooperation, and very close one, between Ukrainian and U.S. Forces, because neither one, without help of the other, could manage such a resulting attack. So this is very, very good development. Ivan, how's the situation? Yes, Jonathan, please.
Yeah, in effect, what you are saying is that the U.S. is effectively helping Ukraine much more behind the scenes than it would appear to be helping Ukraine on the surface. As I pointed out before, we do not necessarily know everything that is going on behind the scenes for very good reason. Operational security and the desire to maintain the potential for strategic surprise. And so that is what the U.S. has been doing to the extent that it can. And Ukraine, to its credit, has been taking maximum advantage of what it has been given to achieve operational and tactical surprise against the Russians. And they have the potential to achieve strategic surprise as well, once they have fully incorporated the capabilities that they are being given, and they select at a time and place of their choosing the opportunity to inflict a decisive strategic counteroffensive against the Russians.
And U.S. Keeps a very ambiguous stand by neither confirming nor denying that.
Exactly. Which is yeah. Go ahead.
What actually is interesting, that I think that the end beneficiary of that successful operation is not Ukraine, because that element of Russian air defense system actually is element of their so-called nuclear triangle. It's element of their anti-nuclear ballistic missile defense system.
Yeah, it's strategic.
It's a strategic defense system, and Ukraine obviously doesn't have any ballistic missiles, any strategic nuclear weapons. So we will be really interested in destroying some elements of defense of Russia. And from my own point of view, I think there are two major reasons why that object was struck. First reason is maybe some kind of secret order from our American partners to destroy this element. And maybe another way, which is more, especially for me, is more closer to become true, is to show that Russia is blackmailing actually, and that Russia can, when they are threatening Ukraine and our Western allies, that they will increase the stakes and there are some kind of red lines which you can cross, and when such operation happens deep inside the territory of Russia, there is a question: is it already a red line which we shouldn't cross, or what? And now is the time for Russia to show what they can give as their opposite kind of attack to this operation, and they can do nothing. The only thing they can do is to throw bombs on a peaceful Ukrainian city of Kharkiv and terrorizing its populations. They've got an element of their strategic defense destroyed, and they can do nothing against it because all their possible efforts are already involved into war in Ukraine. They have no special strategic reserves to throw in battle. They can't actually attack Kyiv anymore. That's why they've stopped missile attacks on Kyiv, because the air ballistic defense of Kyiv is so powerful that they just waste their rockets trying to attack Kyiv. They can't bring their airplanes bombing the entire Ukrainian territory, because if their airplanes will fly deeper in Ukrainian territory, they will be shot down. Ukrainians are actually shooting down their airplanes, even their strategic bombers, which are close to Ukrainian borders, like 200 or 300 kilometers from Ukrainian borders. So they can do nothing as an opposite act of their showing their power towards that successful Ukrainian operation. So the next question is, what Western countries are afraid of? What kind of escalation from Russia they're afraid of? Because it's what Russia can do is just to blackmail everyone and to have a great PR, where both journalists and politicians and their armies of bots showing commenting with a similar kind of comments in social media that Russia is a powerful bear. Please don't threaten the powerful Russian bear, or Russia will strike back. With what?
Yeah,
I think this Russian blackmail is about to end, and anytime soon. And apparently the same Mr. Remchukov that I've listened to yesterday, he's now saying another very interesting thing. He's saying that the cornerstone of Russian military doctrine was the use of nuclear weapons. And so that would be the same effective weapon to defend the country and to attack the enemy. So it is enormously important. And this war showed complete futility of this doctrine, because you can have as many nuclear weapons as you can amass, but you can't use them because you will be the first one to be destroyed. So how you can unleash something which will destroy you first? And
well, and yes, and the fact that the Ukrainians are successfully destroying any semblance of a strategic defense against a NATO nuclear counterattack, this will help deter the Russians even more from trying to unleash a nuclear attack. And it is again just argues for the U.S. and its NATO allies to continue not only contributing to Ukraine's ballistic missile defense system and air defense system, but to also to create and eventually complete it, even after the active war is concluded, with either an armistice or a ceasefire, even if it's only to create a situation that exists currently between North and South Korea. You don't need a peace treaty. You can proceed with continuing to rebuild Ukraine, with continuing to encourage Ukrainians who have fled the country to come back and help rebuild Ukraine and restore it, and just continue to move on from there and continue to neutralize the Russians' ability to threaten the West with its nuclear arsenal. And the way to do that is with continuing to use our available technology to eventually neutralize the one thing that Russia considers makes it a great power.
Absolutely. And with that, Remchukov is quite pessimistic about the dozens of years of non-nuclear second Cold War, where there will be only economic competition between who will create more and more specifically sophisticated weapons, non-nuclear weapons. And in that respect, he doesn't see Russia's prospects very bright, especially being under sanctions. And because there is no active war, it will be very difficult to make a case to its satellites like North Korea or Iran or China or whoever else there to support and help Russia. What for? So in this situation, what's the way for Russia either out of the situation? Well, he says that there could be few pluses as well for Russia. For example, there will be a huge demand all over the world about conventional weapons everywhere for years to come. So because the capacity of the West are somewhat limited, so Russian weapons could be also used, especially because of the much better prices than for Western weapons. And although they are inferior to Western weapons, but simply because of the price consideration, also in some cases for certain items, there will be years to wait until it could be delivered. So in this case, Russia could use this to its advantage and supply some of this, although inferior weapons, but still at much better prices. So maybe there will be some kind of a
But even so, Sasha, if we succeed in converting this the current Russian-Ukrainian war into a ceasefire, and Ukraine becomes a member of NATO and the European Union, and we proceed with the rebuilding, and if our biggest problem is worrying about Russia supplying other countries with lesser levels of technology and weaponry, then even though we have not completely solved the problem, we have transformed a bigger problem into a lesser problem. And that all by itself is a worthwhile achievement.
Ivan, you probably noticed that there lately were a lot of noises about Putin really wants to have some peace, or at least end the war, at least to have an armistice with Ukraine. And what's interesting is that the commentators, like Remchukov, for example, he says that Putin would love to have some kind of peace treaty with Ukraine and with the West. But regarding Ukraine, there is one problem. There is no legitimate person representing Ukraine who can sign that treaty. Because Zelensky he's no longer a president because it's already over 5 years that he's been there, and Ukrainian Duma also lost its legitimacy. So tell us who would be the person to sign it. So this is
I actually don't know what is in the head of mad person. He obviously lost his mind already, obviously in 2022 when he ordered to invade the Ukraine. From other side, President Zelensky also, according to the Ukrainian law, can't make any negotiations with Putin because for Ukrainians he's not legitimate as well, because he was elected also by the population who voted for him under the with soldiers behind their backs on occupied territories. So how maybe legitimate president, which was for which population of occupied territories according to Russian law voted. So it's like a very funny situation. But I know the exit from this situation. Obviously, Russians have to choose another president to throw away Putin from his throne, like they did with the previous Russian Tsar, and maybe the next one who will rule Russia will really want a peace, because Putin is not wanting any peace. We've seen that video in the beginning when aggressor wants a peace, then probably the aggressor will stop his aggression and say, okay, I was not right. Let's go and make some peaceful negotiations. I was mistaken. Sorry, I've hurted you. Sorry, I've killed your people. Sorry, I've ruined your cities. Sorry, I've raped your women. Sorry, I've kidnapped your girls. Sorry, I've stolen your washing machines and all that stuff. I was mistaken. Let's go into peace negotiations.
Here is your washing machines and so on.
Yeah. I will give you your washing machines. I will punish those criminals who stole them. I will punish all those Russian officers who ordered to bomb your peaceful cities and killed your civilians. I will punish all those Russian pilots who were throwing bombs on peaceful Ukrainian cities. Let's go and make some peace negotiations. This, for any normal person, sounds like a real sign that you're going to make any peace. But when you, from one point of view, saying about that you want peace negotiations, and now you continue bombing Ukrainian cities, continuing attacking, continuing that escalation, putting more and more forces to the borders. You're striking the shopping malls, like last Saturday when Russians thrown air bombs on a shopping mall, killing almost 20 people and injuring more than 15 people there in Kharkiv. You've seen that in video. Is it a sign of desire to make any peace negotiations? I think no.
No, absolutely.
I agree.
All what Putin is saying is that he and Russia is the pinnacle of the following the law. It's a law-abiding country, and Putin is a law-abiding citizen. And the only reason why he started to mess up with Ukraine, starting with the Crimea 10 years ago, was that there was a legitimate coup against Yanukovych. So Ukraine, from being there, all of a sudden de-escalated into lawlessness. There is no legitimate government. Still, even Poroshenko was not legitimate, Zelensky even more illegitimate, and now even that illegitimate 5 years already expired, and Duma is expired. So Ukraine is, okay, it's a country with absolutely no legal lawful representation. So what he wants Ukrainians to do, to have a new Duma elected, and that Duma will appoint somebody to conduct negotiations with Russia and eventually sign it. Without that mechanism, even regardless how much Putin wants peace, there is no legitimate way, because Ukraine has nobody to sign that peace. So that's why there is no peace and cannot be a peace. This is laughable matter, of course.
Very convenient excuse.
Yeah.
I think within some time he will be okay to sign this peace negotiations with anyone, and as longer as Ukraine keep struggling and defending against the Russian aggression, the less powerful Russia will be, because they're already depleting their stocks of old Soviet weapons. They are not able to keep such pace of war like they were ready to for these 2 years. Unfortunately, some countries are helping Russia, like Iran, like North Korea, like China, and
Well,
without
they
their
hardly have
assistance,
bottomless resources.
without their assistance, last year we've seen the situation when Russia were lack of artillery shells, and they were not able to cover their attacks by such a high number of artillery shells. The problem is that Ukraine is lacking artillery shells every day, because on the more than 2 years of war, neither United States nor European countries are not able to produce such great numbers of artillery shells which are required for such kind of war, because every day they're using dozens of artillery shells on the battlefield, and that's a real problem. But time goes, Russia actually is not getting stronger. They say that they're getting stronger, but from the other side, we see how their strategic objects are being destroyed, how their oil refineries are being destroyed, how their old warehouses of old Soviet weapons, of old Soviet artillery, old Soviet tanks and armored vehicles are being depleted with you can just Google and see those satellite images when those enormous warehouses of those weapons which were open air, stored on the open air, they're depleted. They're like less than a quarter of the remaining weapons on these storages, and it doesn't show that Russia is getting stronger. It shows that Russia is getting weaker, and
Black Sea Fleet is being almost completely.
they have no Black Sea Fleet recently, thanks to the long-range ATACMS missiles. Their last boat, military gunboat, which was able to launch the Kaliber and Onyx missiles in the Black Sea, was destroyed in Crimea. They have no more rocket. They have no more missile boats in their Black Sea, which are able to launch the missiles. Unfortunately, they left several submarines in the Black Sea, and it's a challenge for the Ukrainian armed forces how to deal with those submarines. And I'm pretty sure that those submarines, both with the Crimean Bridge, are next, and with that, it will be the end of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. So it's also a significance that Russia is getting weaker and weaker, and even if the war will stop with some kind of peaceful negotiations this or next year, they have they will require a lot of time to replenish their stocks, to repair all their destroyed infrastructure, military objects, in order to get into full power. But obviously, after that, they will not attack Ukraine, understanding that Ukraine for these years became even stronger. They will try to go to the Baltic states, or maybe try to attack other countries of former Soviet Union to get more and more territories to satisfy the bloodlust actually of those regular Russians which were zombified for years about the greatness of Russia, greatness of Russian army. So they just want the proof of such greatness, and unfortunately for them, and luckily for us, they can deal with all their greatness. They can deal with the Ukraine. They can't deal not even with the whole Ukraine. They can't even capture the part of Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia region, which according to the Russian constitution are already part of Russia, because they've written in their update for their constitution that those regions are part of Russia, and according to their constitution, those regions are now occupied by Ukrainian, by Kiev regime. They're not the Ukrainian territories which they attacked and annexed. According to them, they are Russian territories which are occupied by the Kiev regime. It's like they are trying to review, to make a one-way review of borders in the Baltic Sea, because they are not happy with those borders when during the times of Soviet Union and their satellites, they controlled more than 50% of the Baltic Sea. Now Russia is controlling less than 10% of the Baltic Sea, and they are provoking the Baltic countries by this so-called one-way review of the borders in the Baltic Sea. They're looking for Russian. They're crazy people, actually. That's what I'm pretty sure.
To mention about Baltics, obviously something is brewing there, because, for example, in a country as Latvia, there are a lot of Russian-speaking people, same as Latvian-speaking people, and this is a huge divide.
30% actually, not a lot, but it's 30%. It's not like in Ukraine, when in Ukraine majority of the southern regions, of the eastern regions, and even of the central regions of Ukraine, they were even in Kiev they spoke Russian. In Latvia, around 30% of Russians, and what is remarkable, that not all of them are citizens of Latvia. Yes. Because in order to get the Latvian citizenship in Latvia, you must know the Latvian language, you must know the history, and you must not be a great fan of the Soviet Union. So Latvia is understanding that Russia can use this population for some kind of hybrid attack. Their departure in those who are not who doesn't get Latvian citizenship, and it's a normal country policy. If you're so in love with Russia, and actually it concerns to all Russians living in the United States, whatever. If you're so in love in Russia that you like the Russian flag, which is a flag of occupiers, of aggressors, of Russian soldiers, or committing atrocities in Ukraine, if you love it so much, if you love Putin, then go back to Russia. It's a big country with a great territory. Not of all the territory is civilized. You can go to Siberia and you can build a better life here. Why you're living in Europe, why you're living in United States, and why you are saying that Russia is such a great country, but not want to come back here. This is like some kind of bipolar psycho illness, I think, of Russians who consider that Russia is a great country. They're showing everyone their Russian passport, their Russian flag, but they don't want to get back to Russia.
That's right. They want to love Russia at the distance. They want to love Russia, but they don't want to live in Russia. So they want to keep loving Russia, but be outside of Russia. That's a problem. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We have to leave something for our upcoming program on Friday. Thank you so much for today's program. And I think we are living in an interesting time. In a few months, I think we will see demilitarization of Russia because they will not be able to withstand and
Hopefully.
continue to send tens of thousands of people to be killed, to lose all their ammunition, and continue on like that for many more months. I don't believe it, but I could be wrong as well. In this case, thank you very much again, and Slava Ukraini. Glory to Ukraine.
Everyone, Slava. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.